And it's important that you understand that a restraining order should not be the only safety mechanism that you have in place. I don't want you to get a false sense of security because you have a restraining order. If you were dealing with a reasonable human being, you wouldn't need a restraining order. You could simply say, leave me alone, and they would listen. So, it's important that you understand that you're probably not dealing with a reasonable person. There are some who have enough respect for the court and are serious about their own freedom enough that they're not going to do anything that's going to take them to jail. That's a boundary that they will respect. They might not like it, but they're not trying to go to jail. That's going to cost them more than they're willing to pay. So they may respect it. But then you have those who will be enraged by a restraining order. They will be enraged by a restraining order. This is the height of them not having control over the victim. This is the height of other people intervening in their business. And this could really just make things worse. And so it's imperative that you have a safety plan. Do not get a restraining order and think that's all you need to do. You've got to have a safety plan. You need a safety plan, and I try to say this every week. If you say, I'm in love with this person and I think that we can make it, you still need a safety plan. You need a safety plan to stay and live. Okay, you need a safety plan. If you're planning to leave in the next 10 minutes, you need a safety plan that's going to cover your exiting that residence and what happens when you leave there. If you're already out, you need a safety plan. All right, you need a safety plan. That 30 to 90 days after that separation kicks in, you are at high risk of becoming a domestic violence homicide statistic. At the very least, you may suffer greater violence because of the complete lack of control that the abuser is experiencing at that time. If it's been 5, 6, 10 years, you need a safety plan. Why? Why do you say that? Well, you know, that was 5 years ago. Haven't heard anything from him or her. But what's going on in their life? What happens the next time they get rejected? There have been instances where abusers have gone on and established relationships with new people. That relationship fractured. They put them out. They went to court. And that joker circled back around and killed the last person he was with. Because he never got over the rage from losing control in that first relationship. So it's not about what's going on in the victim's life. It's about what's going on in the abuser's life. What's going to push them over the edge. So 30 to 90 days after is a high risk time. When you first get a restraining order, high risk. And I'm going to read some statistics to you later. And we don't employ scare tactics. I'm all about what is the truth, okay? What is the truth so that we can make informed decisions about how best to proceed. So it's an individual decision, and it's something that the victim has to think through because they've got to be able and willing to execute, to walk it out, no matter what they decide. You've got to have a viable safety plan. Now, if you go to our blog, www.judasroar.com, and I'll put that up here in a few minutes when we're done, you will, if you subscribe to the blog, then you will be automatically emailed a template for a safety plan. Now, every single safety plan is not identical, but the idea is, you know, I designed it and developed it to provoke thought process about different areas of your life that you need to consider how you can maintain your safety. Don't ever think that you have such, you know, an amazing relationship with an abuser that you can trust what they say concerning not ever harming you again, because you just cannot. You can't. You cannot. If they respected you in the first place, they would not have mistreated you. Who qualifies for a protection order? The two parties must have a specific type of relationship. Number 1, parties who were or are married. Number 2, parties who were or are dating, including same-sex couples. Domestic violence is a tremendous issue even among same-sex couples. So no one is immune. We're all affected by it. Number 3, parties who have a child together. So there has to be some kind of specific relationships. Now, as I told you, the statutes vary from state to state. Some states allow for parent, child, siblings, or people related by marriage. They consider those domestic relationships, even like a mother-in-law. And then some states allow for people who live in the same household. You don't have to have an intimate relationship with them, and you don't have to be related to them by blood, but you reside at the same home. You reside at the same address. Some states allow for restraining orders if someone is stalking or harassing you. So again, it's important to know what the statute is in the state that you reside in. It's important that you have to live in the state or in order to file a protection order in that state. So most of the time, you have to reside in the state that you are forming, that you're requesting the restraining order in. Why is that? Because the judge may not have jurisdiction over someone in another state. These are state laws and state statutes. Why am I bringing that up? Because in this day and age, there is so much online dating, online relationships where one party lives in one state and another party lives in another state, and I'm going to visit you this week and you're going to visit me next week. If something happens, if some domestic violence occurs, where did it occur? Because if you don't live where it occurred, you may be at a disadvantage in terms of getting a restraining order. It's going to be difficult for you to go to your home state and request a restraining order against someone who does not reside in the same state that you reside in. So that's why I bring that up. Only because the prevalence of dating across state lines is so huge right now. What abusive behavior qualifies for a protection order? Each state and territory identifies within its laws the criteria for the issuing of a protective order, an order of protection, a restraining order. It may be called different things in different states. But the statute defines clearly what must be included in order for a victim to be eligible to get a restraining order. Some states allow for non-physical acts, harassment, threats to harm a pet, threats to harm a loved one. But, I mean, in those cases, you got to be able to quantify that these things has happened. So if you have a witness or you have a screenshot or a voicemail, something that quantifies that these things have actually occurred. You want to write the incidents down with as much detail as possible, even if you feel that you're not ready to try to go get a restraining order. You want to be able to show how the abuse has heightened and built upon itself over time. You want to be able to show what the pattern is to the judge. Because remember now, when you go to court, they're going to determine whether to issue a temporary order waiting for a court date or not. And if you leave without one, then you're leaving and you don't have a temporary order of protection. And it's probably because you've not been able to substantiate that the abuse has occurred. Gather the evidence to support your claim. As I said before, medical records, pictures, screenshots of text messages, emails, witness testimony, because they can be subpoenaed to testify in court as well. If you have any torn clothing, damaged property, take pictures of those things. The good thing about pictures now, especially if you take it with your phone, is a date time stamp. So it will be clear when these things occur. Most states won't issue an order of protection solely on the grounds of psychological or emotional abuse unless the abuse occurred while a crime was being committed. For example, stalking or harassment, because stalking is against the law, okay, in all the states. Some states do have a statute of limitations. What do I mean by that? For example, if I am the victim of domestic violence and I wait a year to report it, the state may say, we're not doing anything about that. Either you have re-entered a relationship with this person, or there's no contact, therefore there's no need for a restraining order. You understand what I'm saying? So again, it's important that you know what the statutes are in your particular state. There are 3 possible outcomes after the judge reads your petition for an order of protection. So there are 3 things that can happen. Once you become a victim, you've called the police, you have reached out to a DV advocate or an attorney, you have gone to a DV shelter and they've advised you about getting a restraining order, you have completed the petition, and you have submitted it to the court. There are 3 positions that the judge can take. Number 1, if the judge believes you are in immediate danger, they may issue an ex parte TPO. Okay, that's an ex parte. Remember I said ex parte means that the abuser is not in court. But if they read the petition and they look at the evidence that you have provided and they come to the conclusion that you are in immediate danger, Like, if we don't issue this order, something bad's going to happen, more likely than not, okay? Then they can issue the order even though the abuser is not in court. And then the judge will decide to set a date for a hearing for a final order. The victim will need to convince the judge that they were abused, which is why all the evidence is important and witness statements are important. And the abuser may be there to defend themselves at the court hearing. So that's something that you have to prepare mentally for. And that's a good time really to make sure that you're connected to a DV advocate, someone that can go with you so that you're not in court by yourself. If the judge does not believe that you are in immediate danger, but believes that you may be able to prove the abuse at a hearing, the judge may deny the temporary ex parte order and schedule the case for a final hearing. The victim, again, will need to convince the judge that the abuse has taken place and the abuser can be present to defend themselves. Number 3, if the judge believes that the acts reported do not qualify the victim for a protection order, it may be denied altogether. Now, sadly, there have been cases where it's been denied, and then a homicide occurred later. And I don't know if it's because maybe there wasn't enough evidence in the petition. I don't know. But there are instances where you go to court and it's denied and the abuser continues to ramp up. Okay, here are some facts that I want to share with you that I find very, very sobering. And these are from the Family Justice Center. 1 out of 5 homicide victims with restraining orders are murdered within 2 days of obtaining the order. 1 out of 5 homicide victims with restraining orders. This means that they've called the police after an abusive episode. They have taken the next step, which is huge, and petitioned the court for a restraining order. The judge read their evidence, looked at their medical records or whatever, and determined that they were in immediate danger and provided them with an order of protection, or they didn't give them one initially. They came back to court. They were able to convince the judge and to provide evidence, right, that they were being abused. They got the restraining order, which, let me tell you, it's not a walk in the park. You've got to convince a whole human being that has nothing to do with you that you're in danger. And you've got to be able to prove it. It can't just be that you're saying it. So these are tremendous steps for a victim to take. But then 1 out of 5 homicide victims with restraining orders are murdered within 2 days of obtaining the order. What did I tell you? That 30 to 90 day window, you're at a heightened risk of becoming a homicide statistic. Here's another stat for you. 1/3 of homicide victims with restraining orders are murdered within 1 month. So if they don't fall into the category of the 1 out of 5 who are murdered within 2 days, within 1 month, 1/3 of them are murdered. A woman is 70 times more likely to be murdered in the few weeks after leaving her abuser than any other time. I try to share that every time that I'm on because it's important. It's also important to know that men are victims too. But most of the cases that are reported are with women being victims and men being perpetrators. So that 30 to 90 day window is critical. Again, safety planning is vitally important. And someone besides you needs to be involved in the planning because you're not thinking of everything. You are traumatized. Your brain has been rewired because of the trauma. You're not thinking clearly. You are anxious. You are scared. You are sleep deprived. And someone else, a DV advocate, someone outside of your situation needs to be able to look at your plan and tell you where the holes are. A woman named Tiffany Hill, and I believe it was in Illinois, had a domestic violence incident with her husband, called the police, got a restraining order. He bailed out of jail. Okay, he bailed out. He was out on bail from a previous situation. Went to the children's school. She was there with her mother, so she wasn't traveling alone. The 3 elementary age school kids were in the back seat of the car. He shot and killed her, shot her mother 3 times, and then led the police on a brief chase before stepping out of the vehicle and killing himself. She had a restraining order, but she was at the kid's school, and he knows where that is. A viable safety plan may involve you leaving the area. It may involve you changing your job. It may involve the kids being withdrawn from school. You cannot just live your life the way you always live your life, go to all the same places that you've always gone, hang out the same places, take the same route to and from work, to and from school, and think that they don't know how to find you. So this is why it's important when we talk about safety planning that it's a viable plan, a doable plan, and this is why you need to start planning as soon as possible, because some of this stuff takes time to work out. Where are the kids going to go to school if I have to withdraw them? How am I going to make sure that they're safe while they're in school? How am I going to ensure? Someone being with you does not stop a person who is off their rocker. They are enraged. They're not accepting any responsibility for any of it. And how dare you leave them? And you and whoever's helping you now are target. 20% of DV-related homicides aren't even the victim. They are first responders. They are friends and family members. They are those who have stepped up to help. They are innocent bystanders. So it's important that we be educated. Stop mystifying everything. You're not going to be able to just sprinkle oil on your head and turn around 3 times and tell your neighbor God is good and think that's going to help you. It's not. We've got to get educated. Please, please, please. And so if you make a decision to stay, let it be an educated decision. Do some safety planning while you're in there, okay? Now, again, I'm not an attorney. I am a clinician and a military veteran by trade. So this information has been shared with you for educational purposes, but it's important that you understand that the restraining order, there's nothing magical about it, okay? You're going to draw fire when you get one. You're going to draw fire because that's a clear message to the abuser. I'm involving other people. I don't want anything to do with you. And this, for an abuser, this is challenging their right they feel they have over you for power and control. All right. Let me share this one more thing. Here's the thing. I've heard of instances where in 2 or 3 weeks the abuse pops to the surface. In 2 or 3 months the abuse pops to the surface. And I've heard of situations where they were a perfect angel until about 2 years. About 2 years, then they flip out. That's about the longest I've heard people go. So understand that domestic violence is real. It is a silent epidemic within the church. According to the United Nations, they released a report in 2017 that said that the most dangerous place for a woman is in her own home. This is worldwide. So globally, it's an epidemic. The Bible declares that the Lord's people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge because they rejected knowledge. Not because they don't have it, but because they have an opportunity to obtain it and they choose not to. So know that, understand that. And for those of you who are saying, well, why would God send this person into my life? He did not send them. They showed up and you didn't send them back. That's what happened. God didn't send them. I don't care who endorsed them. I don't care how many collars they wear, how many titles they have. I don't care how long they've been preaching. I don't care if they got a storefront with 5 members or they got a church with 50,000 members. If the Spirit of God lives on the inside of them, they are not abusing and dogging you. They are not doing that. God's not living in there if they're acting like that. And if you're acting like that, he's not living in you either. All right? And if you read in Malachi, all right, the Lord declares that the people who mistreat their partners, their spouses, that the Spirit of God does not live in them. Nor did it. The Spirit of God does not live in them. So let's stop trying to put folk in heaven that are heading in another direction. All right? If you are in a domestic violence situation, God didn't have nothing to do with that. He did not need to send you through that. If he needed to do that, he didn't need to go to the cross. He could just let us go through stuff, right? But he went through the cross so that we could have an abundant life. If it's not abundant, then you're living beneath his privilege. If you don't have peace, then you're living beneath your privilege. All right? And the price has already been paid. The price has already been paid. So let's hold ourselves accountable. Let's pull our head out of the sand. Let's stop being deep and mystical and sprinkling fairy dust and rubbing folk down in oil and not doing anything from a practical standpoint to get folk free. All right? All right? If you are one who has someone who's come to you and said that they're being abused from a domestic violence situation and under those circumstances, and if your response is, well, what did you do to get them upset? Or your response is, well, just pray, just fast and pray, turn your plate down and pray, you are part of the problem. All right? I said what I said. This is Apostle Cheryl L. Richardson. I encourage you to go to www.womenslaw.org. Check out the drop-down menu for the state where you live so that you know what the statutes are in your state or in the state where your loved one resides that lets them know what qualifications have to be met in order for them to get a restraining order. And again, if you're not ready to leave and you still have hope that things can work out, that's your choice. I submit to you that you not fall into that place in Hosea where you're rejecting knowledge. Apply what you've learned. Apply what I'm saying to you. I don't want you to be a hashtag. I mean, it wears me out. It wears me out. The sheer number of people who are losing their lives, the generations to come that are being negatively impacted because they have experienced this trauma is just too much. It's too much. And this is not how God would have us to live. It's not. It is not. If you serve him or not, he does not want this for you. He does not want this for you. Okay? He has an amazing plan for your life. He wants you to live an abundant, fruitful, productive life. Amen? So we thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week. And we ask that you would just keep us in prayer as the vision for ministry continually expands. We're listening for guidance and doing our level best to obey God in his timing and to execute what he tells us to execute. It's important to us to be sensitive to the Spirit of God and to listen so that we can try to stay ahead of what the enemy is doing. And so I want you to know that we don't have a pre-planned list of this is what we're going to talk about on the first, Sunday and the second Sunday and the third Sunday and then on the fourth. That's not how this works. We listen for guidance. We discuss what the Lord tells us to discuss at that time, with the belief that someone will hear what is being said that needs it in order to stay alive at that time. Amen. And so we love you. God bless. Please share it on all your social media platforms. That is completely fine. If you feel led to sow, it would be greatly appreciated. The things that he's given us to do are not free. And we are certainly willing to do them, and we're trusting him for provision. But I can't do it without you, and I certainly won't even try without him. Amen. This is Apostle Cheryl L. Richardson. We love you much. Inbox us if we can help you. Please share this broadcast, and we'll be back next week. Blessings to you.